I'm looking at your portfolio right now. You gotta buy.
This ad for discount stockbroker Charles Schwab mocked the ethics of Schwab's full-price rivals on Wall Street.
Buy it. Just buy. It's a no-brainer. I'd sell. Did I say sell? No, I meant buy, yes!
The joke is that in the 90s, Wall Street firms were getting paid to push new stocks on the public, despite skepticism obvious in their private emails.
This is only a sample of some of the communications revealed in our investigation.
New York State Attorney General Eliot Spitzer went after Wall Street, getting a firm like Merrill Lynch, for example, to pay a $100 million fine for duping investors. As you can see in their comments, analysts were internally bad-mouthing stocks they were urging investors to buy. Why did they do it?
The motive was investment banking fees and enormous personal compensation for the analysts. In the process, an untold number of people were left to rely on stock ratings that the analysts themselves didn't believe, and there was no telling how much they lost as a result.
Let's pause here to explain how Wall Street firms, known as investment banks, work. They all employ brokers, analysts, and investment bankers who deal exclusively with companies. Brokers like those we just saw in the ad sell investments, primarily the stock of companies, to you and me, their customers. Analysts conduct supposedly objective research on those stocks, advising the brokers on what they're worth. Brokers then use this information to urge their customers to buy, sell, or hold. The analysts were supposed to be independent of the firm and thus credible. But that's not how it worked, according to Wall Street veteran and a former college classmate of mine, Peter Cyrus.
The economics are very simple. You get paid for being a cheerleader if you're an analyst.
In the late 1990s, during the so-called internet boom, piles of money were being made by investment banks. Investment bankers were making lucrative deals with new companies primarily by selling the stock of those companies to the public through their networks of stockbrokers. But how does an investment bank like Merrill Lynch, say, convince you, the CEO of the hot new internet startup, to give it your business instead of going somewhere else? Well, it sure helps if that bank's analysts are enthusiastic about your firm.
Who are you going to give investment banking business to? The guy who says sell, or the guy who says you're geniuses, we love your company?
To induce the analysts to come up with the right answer, the investment bankers began giving them a cut if the firm got the new company's business. Now, put yourself in the analyst's shoes. An internet firm is about to issue more stock for what's called a secondary sale to the public. Do you write an objective report saying its price is too high, and therefore investors ought to sell what stock they may already be holding?
Or do you join the chorus, put a buyout on stock, and your firm gets $5 million of fees from doing a secondary, and you get your $1 million for your cut?
Your cut, but as a salary or a bonus or something?
As a bonus for bringing in investment banking business into the firm.
Really? And that's actually how it works?
Yeah. I mean, you think we went to school together. You think I make up a story like this for your benefit? Yes.
That is how it works.
That's how it works.
In other words, this was simply the accepted way of doing business on Wall Street, as was the manipulation of earnings reports and all sorts of other financial shenanigans. But why should you, who's listening right now, care if big businesses are just ripping off other big businesses? Unethical behavior on the stock market has been going on as long as there have been stock markets. Here's the French artist Daumier in the mid-1800s, depicting a speculator in the French stock market planting false rumors to manipulate prices. In the 1930s, it seemed like all of Wall Street here in America was being jailed for the outrages of the late 20s, and all sorts of institutions were created to protect investors, including the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Much of the history of unethical behavior, if you will, in business has been kind of a big boys game.
So in a sense, it was them against themselves.
Exactly. And obviously stock prices were affected. Obviously the stock market was affected. Obviously the institutional and the individual investor were affected. But we did not have the kind of impact on you and me and the general population that we now do.
Today, says Barbara Toffler, vulnerable investors are the ones getting disproportionately hurt. In other words, phony analyst recommendations could affect your 401k, your mother's pension plan, your uncle's mutual fund. And they did. Attorney Jake Zemansky, who represents defrauded investors, believes lax law enforcement was part of the problem.
There needs to be some serious jail time for analysts who are caught committing fraud, CEOs that are looting their companies. Until we send somebody away for a long period of time in a real prison, nothing is going to change.
One solution, in terms of the graph we introduced in our first video on business ethics, shift the marginal cost curve to the left. Raise the cost of unethical behavior by clamping down. Stricter enforcement, tougher sentencing, higher penalties. The result is a new equilibrium, a reduced quantity of cheating. But can costs and benefits really replace the concepts of right and wrong? These MBA students at the well-known business school Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts, were grappling with just this issue.
If they're committing fraud, that's a crime, and that's punishable by 5 years, 10 years, 15 years.
If you go and you punish people just because the stock ended up tanking and the market ended up not performing, then you go punishing people for taking risks.
After several hours of heated, sophisticated debate, they were asked whether they would have touted stocks they didn't believe in.
How many would have knuckled under, essentially?
Not a single hand went up. But then one student suggested pushing the hypothetical a bit further.
So if you ask this question again, how many people would put that buy if it got them $20 million in the bank? I think you'd see a lot of hands go up.
$20 million for one buy recommendation. How many people, honestly now? Honest answers.
Again, as we saw earlier, if the marginal benefit curve shifts to the right, meaning greater rewards for the same quantity of cheating, the equilibrium quantity of cheating goes up. Now, there may be little that society can do about a shift in the marginal benefit curve. If one buy recommendation is really worth $20 million, it's worth $20 million. So if you can't affect the marginal benefit curve, how do you discourage cheating? Shift the marginal cost curve to the left, via law, via ethics. Make people too ashamed to cheat by shaming them publicly. Punish the cheaters via public prosecutions and harsh jail terms. By this analysis, the rise of white-collar crime in the 1990s becomes quite understandable. The marginal benefit curve had shifted right due to a surge in the economy, and especially on Wall Street. The marginal cost curve had also shifted right due to the era of so-called deregulation, the belief that government should get out of the way of business. As for ethics in the religious, non-business sense of the word, what's right to do and what's wrong, regardless of costs and benefits, we asked the professor of the Babson ethics class, Presbyterian minister Tom Sullivan, about the $20 million vote.
What would Jesus have thought of it?
Jesus would have said, oh, come on, you can't do that, and you know you can't do it. He would have been a good Jew in saying that. He'd be a good Christian in saying that. He'd be a good Hindu. He'd be a good Buddhist. Nobody who takes any kind of spiritual values seriously is going to say, oh yeah, that's fine.
Indeed, spiritual values may explain the results of one last vote.
How many of you would imagine that your parents think that your generation is less ethical than theirs? Every single one of you?
What, if anything, can we do about this? We can appeal to people's spiritual values. We can, as we've seen, shift the marginal cost curve to the left. And, says textbook author David Colander, we can follow the advice of the very first modern economist, Adam Smith, who said that the invisible hand of competition was also a defense against unethical business behavior.
Adam Smith said, seldom do businessmen get together, but that it works out to the detriment of the public. So we have to rely upon competition. And we have to set up the system so that we have this checks and balances, something offsetting the people as they try and take advantage of the system. And that ultimately, that's what we have to rely on. Not because we don't believe that ethical behavior would be wonderful, but because it's not that sturdy. It's not that stable.
On the other hand, competition won't do it all. Ethics, standards of behavior, are essential to the functioning of business. Because without market rules and institutions to enforce them, the free market could very well turn into, and often has turned into, a free market free-for-all.